Hello, family. It's been a while. I have decided to do a 2026 prediction video. It's been a while since I've done one of those. So let's just see where we go. I am not really planning anything. I'm going to go just by what comes to me. If you don't know me, my name is Simran. I'm an intuitive, an energy reader, a psychic, amongst many other things. And I have done very few of these things this past year just because it's been such a crazy year. But I feel that it's important we do a wrap up of this past year and see what are the likely things to emerge. Bear in mind that this is just for entertainment. These are my views coming through my channel, my prism. Take it or leave it. Don't plan your life by it. See what resonates, see what triggers you, and see what you can get curious about. So with that said, let's get started. I'm going to cleanse the space. As you know, I try to not disrespect the plants, so I only use them very frugally, asking for permission to clear the space. I'm also going to be using my crystal ball today. Cleansing the crystal ball, cleansing the cards that I'm going to be using. We'll go through what they are as we get to it. Cleansing my aura. And really participating together so that this is a collective co-creation. Asking Archangel Michael to come through, protect the space, protect everyone on this feed, now and in the future, that whenever you see it, it's the right time. Asking the messages to come through clearly for the highest and best good of all involved. Allow me to be a clear channel to speak truth from the highest divine source of true love, from true creator, to remove all interference. Any eyes that this is not meant for, let us be invisible. Let us be impervious to any dark energies, any interference from this reality and any other. And so it is. Just going to leave that here. I have one more card deck that I'm going to cleanse. And I will do timestamps so that if you have ADHD or short attention spans like me, you can just fast forward. I will have chapters when this is fully uploaded, so that will help you as well. All right, let's begin. So, as I said, I'm just going to speak about what comes to me in the moment. I'm going to start with my crystal ball. And really, this is just to focus my energy, to help to focus my thoughts, because really, I trust my channel the most. But sometimes the crystal ball can help me to focus my energy. So we're going to go with this. So let's begin and just see what comes through. And then I will maybe go to the cards later, depending on timing. So as you know, that this year has been a 9-year in numerology. This is about endings. This is about ending a lot of karmic density, ancestral ties and stories. And I had made prediction video in 2020 talking about the karmic almost comeuppance, karmic cycle ending for the United States, the United Kingdom. And I talked about a lot of disintegration, both for the United Kingdom, for the United States, and, as we'll get into it, most of the Western world. And as we've seen, this has also been a time of a lot of anticipated disclosure, but it hasn't all come through. So with that, let's start. Let's just see what comes through. Allow me a few moments to just focus. I'm being taken straight to the United States. The United States is almost like, it's like flying the flag for a lot of the density, and it's almost what's happening in the US is highlighting the way the world is going. And I am going to caveat that with the global north versus the global south. And the United States, the empire of the United States, is represented by the global north. Now, as we know, not all countries fit into there. There are exceptions, obviously, but the US will, because it has so much influence in most institutions, in most of the world that we currently live in, we're going to go with reading about the United States. Now, I do see fires. Are they fires of cleansing? Are they fires of purgatory? I can't tell for the moment, but I see a lot of fires. It's like the United States is putting out a lot of fires internally and externally. But let's start with internally. And what I'm being shown is still a splintering of the US. I continue to see parts of the United States, again, California, Texas, seceding. I believe these forces are well and truly underway. So I'm not saying this is going to happen next year, but I'm saying that you're going to see more of a move towards certain states, especially Texas, California, going towards greater autonomy. We've seen that, and we've seen the powers in the central government try to clamp down. And I do see that as continuing. So in the United States, it feels like the people are waking up to the lies, the corruption, the drama, the lies of the powers that be. And when I talk about the powers that be, I think you understand, but you could call it the cabal, the shadow government. They're the powers that control what we see are the leaders, but we know that there are shadow elements behind these leaders. And Trump, as we've seen, is only a puppet. And I do see that he is severely compromised. Take that as you might want to interpret it. He's severely compromised. And there were elements in his government that had the right intention, but they were thwarted. So Trump is controlled. I'm seeing he's been controlled, but he is playing a role. He has a very important role, and I believe he actually is the last president for the United States the way we have known it for the last 200 years maybe, and that his presidency marks some kind of end point. Now, I can't tell you exactly what comes after, but I do see there's going to be a stark change in government, in structures, in the way that we actually see the functioning of this nation. Is he the last president of the United States as we know it? The answer that I'm getting right now is yes. Again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, good or bad. From my personal perspective, I have my own opinions, but from a higher perspective, he is playing a role. And a lot of this role is to actually show the corruption, show the shadow elements, to show the deception, and actually the servitude of the people, not of only the domestic United States and the people that live there, but also on a larger scale. So the United States, not the people, the controllers of the United States, have been guilty of subjugation, not just of their own people, but of a lot of the world. And what does it look like going forward for 2026? I see a lot more collapses, a lot more stories coming out. Are the Epstein files going to be released? Not in the way that we think. We already know a lot. There's so-called a lot of conspiracy theories that have been touted, and a lot of them are actually true. So a lot of the big figures, the heads of governments, heads of states, heads of corporations that we have been leaked information about, a lot of those are actually implicated, but we won't necessarily be told about them. I'm recording this video on the 19th, which is when they're supposed to be released. And I have this feeling that I'm recording at 3:30 p.m. French time, so they have not been released yet. I'm not aware of them being released, but what I get is that there is widespread disillusionment. Like they said they were going to do something, but it's not what we thought. And a lot of us expected that. So don't look to the government to give you disclosure, full truth. And this is some of the lessons that we're going to be, these are some of the lessons that we're learning as 2025 wraps up and going into 2026. My word for all my work has been sovereignty, but more than ever, we have to rely on ourselves, our intuition, our inner knowing, our common sense, and stop relying on governments and institutions to tell us a truth, to give us disclosure. What are we able to see? That's what we're supposed to go on. We're supposed to go by our own inner knowing as opposed to being validated from an external source. And the United States, it has, I see like octopus hands everywhere in many different, obviously not just countries, militaries, but institutions. And we see how institutions that have been funded or backed by the United States, we're seeing a lot of that power, the hard power of the United States, economically, militarily, financially, being used as a pawn with institutions that don't obey. So they're not actually, we are going to be shown that these institutions like the ICJ, like the ICC, like the United Nations, they've all been puppets of the victors of World War II, of which the United States was one of the main victors. We call them allied powers, but these allied powers of the victors of World War II, we're seeing that they are going to be much less important on the world stage going forward. And that starts with the United States, but we're going to see how a lot of this hard power is showing up to be unjust. So all the injustices that have permeated through the clutches of these octopus legs through the United States is either voluntarily or going to be forced to relinquish this because of a lot of turmoil at home, but also because they're not going to be able to keep up with the speed of disintegration of the descent. So the time of the United States being able to exert its will without any interference, without any consequences, that time is coming to an end. So we're going to see that with a lot of the faith in these global institutions, which the United States has been instrumental in leading. We're going to be seeing that as disintegrating, as people see through the power structures and how it's actually not about global justice or human rights or international law, because the United States is going to show itself for what it has been the last 200 years, which has basically been building empire. And obviously linked to the United States are coming issues of AI. And I just see AI as this big, gray, dark sludge. And I see this sludge as going through a human brain, almost like it's a sludge that is dumbing us down, that is taking away our light. Now, I'm not saying that it's all bad, but this is an image that I'm getting, so I'm going to speak it as I see it. And I see this image of this kind of darkness coming through a human, like a human brain, but going all the way through the body. So I definitely see AI accelerating. And I don't necessarily see it as something good. I see it as this dark gray sludge, gray-black sludge, dimming down our senses, our vitality. And obviously, there are always pockets of creation and opportunity in all new technologies. But this particular technology, I see that we actually don't know what we have. It's like let out of the bag, what genie we've let out of the bag. That's what I'm seeing. We don't know what we have unleashed. And I am also getting the message that obviously there are other beings that are looking at what is happening on Earth, and they are watching with a lot of not only interest, but concern. And I do have this feeling that we're going through times that we have gone through in another timeline. You can think about Atlantis. You can think about the destruction of Atlantis through high technology, through greed, through power, through a lot of left brain technology over intuition, technology and consumerism over humanity, over nature. And we know how that ended. And if you don't know about Atlantis, Atlantis collapsed. And this time, I believe that you can call them the Galactics, forces beyond this planet. They are looking at us and what we're unleashing with both interest and concern. That's what I'm getting. This is not to scare anyone. This is not to say that AI can also be useful. But together with AI, obviously, I again see these tentacles, and it's another way that the United States, because obviously we know that China is involved in the AI race, you could call it. It's the new arms race. It's like this, it's like the battle for singularity, and they don't actually know what they're battling for. So as we continue with the United States and AI, and the implications of AI, we're seeing these tentacles and how AI is permeating all aspects of our life. there's concerns about jobs, but obviously as AI takes over some jobs, there are also opportunities for other jobs. And I see almost like a huge return to what's real, what's human, what's organic, what's authentic. And whereas I feel 2025 has been the culmination of chasing perfection, chasing AI, chasing bright, shiny things, chasing a flawless look, chasing consumerism. As we're ending 2025, a lot of people are leaving social media. They're cultivating community. They're learning to grow their own food. And I believe this trend will continue. So as AI accelerates in its development, we will have a counter movement where I see a lot of people, it's like communes, not in the communist sense, but communes, communal living, having much less reliance on technology. A lot of women, for example, altering their faces much less with harsh treatments. Now, I'm not making a judgment of whether that's good or bad, but I am seeing a trend to doing less of that, around wanting to see real humans with their flaws, and about literally this Japanese art, I forgot the name, but this Japanese art of when like a piece of pottery is broken, to mend it with like gold. Allow that flaw to be there, but you can see where that flaw is. And what that flaw is what gives this new, well, this old piece of pottery character. So it's going to be a celebration of what's real. As we're seeing side by side a juxtaposition between artificial, perfection, what we deem as perfection, flawless, airbrushed, surgery, Botox, fillers, in this quest to be perfect. I believe there's going to be a counterbalance where people, not just women, people in general are going to want something more real. People are going to want more authenticity. And as this AI permeating out of the US, because I do see it's led by the US still, China's up there, but we're speaking about the US right now, and I do see that it's tentacles through AI and surveillance. Surveillance, more than you can imagine. So I'm being told we know we're being surveyed, but it's more than we can imagine. And obviously, I also see another country implicated, where we know that this country has created war and havoc in the Middle East, but not just the Middle East. I believe you all know which country I'm talking about. The US is in cahoots with this country in the Middle East, which has been perpetrating war. And this surveillance through AI is just going to accelerate. And from there, I believe there's going to be new innovation to try to counter it. So I do believe that there's going to be new technologies, new platforms, which actually do stand for freedom of speech, which actually do stand for authenticity, which actually do stand for equality, which actually don't censor. And I believe there's going to be a proliferation of these new technologies, and I see a huge wave of people leaving the Facebooks, Instagrams, the meta structures. Obviously not everyone, but a substantial amount. Because people know that they're being gaslit. Let's move from the United States in terms of, okay, no, I'm being told we're not done yet. United States and its impact in NATO. I believe NATO is already finished. NATO is finished. The US, even though it's probably still paying and giving arms, even though it says it's not, it still is paying and giving arms. Not as much as before, but it still is. However, it's reduced, and this is going to reduce with time. And I believe the first quarter of 2026, the war between Ukraine and Russia will pretty much be over. And Russia is the victor there. And the United States already knows it. Trump already knows it. But NATO and Europe are not able to reconcile with that. And I believe that it's because NATO and the European Union, including the United Kingdom, a lot of the leaders of these countries, not all, I'm not talking necessarily about Ireland, Portugal, Spain, but definitely Western, Northern Europe, are heavily compromised in terms of their governments. And when I'm saying that, I mean, they're not for the people. They're not representative of the people. Venezuela, the US and Venezuela, obviously, it's a lot about oil, resources, strategic interests, the Monroe Doctrine. So the Monroe Doctrine is about the US exerting influence in what it considers its backyard, and it considers Latin America its backyard, and how it involves itself in governments and systems and overthrows covertly or overtly to make sure that they are subservient to the US. Venezuela has not been, and which is why they want to bring it into line. And I definitely see again the tentacles of the country in the Middle East somehow involved in that. And I'm getting some people say, oh, but Iran, China, Russia, they're interfering in the affairs of Venezuela. Well, that's because Venezuela asked for that. And there's a difference between the US dominating versus a country taking sovereign action for itself. And a lot of what we're seeing in the Western media, in the mainstream, is actually not what's happening in the country. And we are not being told about the real will of the people. And a lot of people are saying, oh, the leader, Maduro, is a dictator and the people hate him. And I'm being shown another view. Now, I'm not saying you have to agree with me. I'm just being shown that what we're seeing in the Western media is not necessarily reflective of what's happening in the country. And definitely, this lady who has won the Nobel Peace Prize, I see her as completely dark, completely dark. She gives me, I feel my heart disintegrating when I think of this woman, Machado. I believe her name is Machado. I get very, very dark energy from her. It's like I don't even want to look into her because I actually feel physically sick. So in terms of, is there going to be war in Venezuela? Will the US invade? Well, the US has already been. It's already violated international law in its purported war on drugs. And I can tell you, it's not about drugs. It's not about drugs. There is no threat to the US in terms of drugs that is warranting this action. So I believe and what I see is very strategic influence over Venezuela, but I don't see it's going to happen the way they think. I don't see a capitulation of Venezuela. And I believe, like all the other times US has got involved where it has not been invited, it will drain its resources, like has been happening in the Middle East, has not won a single war in the Middle East. Americans have died for these wars that they have never won. And I believe more and more Americans, the people, are understanding that. And this is what's going to cause more internal strife. So all the different wars that the US is getting involved in, like brandishing China as evil, brandishing Russia as evil, brandishing Arab states as evil, this polarity about Muslims being evil, about immigrants being evil, it's a deflection from the loss of power of the powers that be. I'm talking about the powers that are controlling the government. They are losing control. And as they're losing control, they're clamping down even harder. So I do see for 2026 in the United States, as well as a general global trend, more power, more control, more surveillance, more division. And this is not something I want. So what I'm speaking about is not something that I want, but I see a lot more turmoil. I see the stock market falling. I see crypto is not as safe as people think it is. This is just what I see and my opinion. You don't have to believe it. And also around crypto and the whole idea around the blockchain and safety, and also who created it, I believe that there's going to be more disclosure around that. And again, it's not what we think it was. A lot of people have been saying that that's a safe haven. I'm not going to say it is or it's not, but all I can see, it's not what people think. It's not what a lot of the pundits and experts think, i.e. in terms of its safety. That's all I can say about that. I don't know enough about it to say more. And I do see that people are saying you're lumping all the safe coins in with the ones that are, let's say, not so safe. But the technology of blockchain that is supposed to have ledgers and controls, as it's becoming more mainstream and it's being used by governments, the whole safety aspect is going to be eroded because it's going to become a tool of more surveillance. That's how I see it. I can be wrong, but that's what I see. Let's move on to Europe, Western Europe. Again, as there's disintegration, upheaval in the United States, there's disintegration, upheaval in Europe. I'm going to focus on a few countries as themes. So Germany, France, huge economic problems. I see the countries as very close to bankrupt. They're not going to say this, they're not going to admit it, but behind the scenes, the fact that France has had so many government collapses in 2025, that is set to continue for 2026. The government, and in terms of stability, continuity, in terms of policy, they're not going to be able to implement anything. Same thing in Germany. Germany, which used to be the powerhouse of Western Europe, I see it it's like in Freefall. I see like literally Freefall falling through the sky. That doesn't mean collapse next year, but it means social upheaval, economic upheaval, people being unhappy. And in this unhappiness, socially, politically, people feeling less secure, there's again going to be this who to blame, and who are the ones to blame? Immigrants, people of color. People want to blame someone, and it's always the people who don't look like the rest, right? The homogenous white Christian Europe. Well, Europe is not homogenized, and it's not only Christian. It's a lot of different countries. And by the way, I do believe that if you come to a place, you should respect its culture and views. That doesn't mean that you negate your own. So I believe these divisions are set to increase, unfortunately. But what these divisions will also show up is how the governments, the people in power, do not have the interests of the people in mind. So I do see it like in the US, the people are going to more and more realize that they need to take their lives in their own hands, because they can't rely on the institutions, on their employers, on the government, on the medical system. They can't rely on them. And also, as there's more right-wing governments and movements, not just in the United States, but also throughout Europe and the United Kingdom, as there's a rise in the right, there's also going to be a counterbalance of people who realize what's happening, and who realize that this divide and conquer strategy that has been used for millennia, and I'm going to say by the shadow forces that have been controlling this planet for millennia, there's going to be this counterbalance between the people who understand that we need to band together, that we need to look out for one another, regardless of race, creed, color, religion, and that as people, we actually all want the same thing. We all want to live in safety and harmony, in abundance, and that actually this is not a race war. This is something about the 1% hoarding the resources so that 90% of the world are on its knees. And I believe that in 2026, people are going to, more people, not everyone, more people are going to be waking up to this. The EU will not survive. Between now and 5 years, it will not survive. The United Kingdom, let's go back to the EU for a second, because NATO will also not survive. I don't see NATO surviving too much beyond its defeat by Russia. And it is a defeat. They are going to try to peddle it, especially the mass media, in many other ways. As I said, I believe in the first quarter of next year, it will be very clear that there's nowhere else to go with this war. And sadly, so many Ukrainians and Russians have died. And by the way, there have been mercenaries and not so mercenaries and armies of the French, of the Germans, of NATO, of the UK, armies fighting in the Ukraine war and dying, and people have not been told. That will come out. United Kingdom, dire straits, unfortunately. Similar theme to Europe and the US. Disintegration. I see a major institution. I don't know if it's a bank or a major bellwether stock going under next year. I can't say exactly what it is, but it's like a household name going under. The government is in freefall. It's very unpopular. Again, the rise of the right. But again, there's going to be a counterforce. So as there's a lot more hate and division on the right, there's going to be a counterforce. Now that counterforce, I see it's in the process of coming together because it's very fractured, and that's the problem. But I do believe that there's going to be another movement that tries to get more unity, more collaboration, less hate and division, and to take back control for the people. Because right now the government is not for the people. The people are very disillusioned with the government, with the structures of their day-to-day life, of how difficult it is. And the media is basically lying. I do see a big media chain going down as well, not surviving. Let's go to Middle East. It's not real. I say it's not real, but I believe you all know which country I'm talking about. And I believe that they have set the seeds of their own destruction. I feel a lot of people living in that country will leave. They have already started to. They're more and more dependent on the United States, and this relationship between the United States and it's not real. It's almost like it's one country. It's like it's the outpost for the United States in the Middle East. But I believe a lot of Americans will not agree with that. And it's going to be very obvious in 2026. And indeed, a lot of the Jewish people around the world will not want to be associated with the destruction and the carnage that the government of this country has perpetrated. So there's a big difference between the political movement, the government, and the religion. And they've tried to make it the same, but it's not. It's not at all. And I believe the cracks in that country, in its social structure, economic structure, but also spiritual structure, and the destruction and war and suffering that has been done in its name, I believe that it's setting the seed for its destruction. What is that? Is that going to happen next year? No, but I believe the seeds have already been set. Are they going to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque? Are they going to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque? I see fire. There's a likelihood that could happen. What would happen then? I'm seeing that it's going to be disappointing, the response to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, if they decide to go down that line. And why is that? Because a lot of the Middle East, unfortunately, is compromised. The governments, not the people. Al-Aqsa Mosque. Al-Aqsa. I just sense a lot of sadness. I'm not going to say things I don't see here. I'm not going to pretend to see things I don't, but I feel a lot of heaviness and sadness when I'm thinking about the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I see tears and suffering and feelings of helplessness. And I believe it's these feelings of helplessness that are going to bring people together, and where people are going to take their sovereignty back and have faith, not only just in their own religions for themselves, but actually have a deeper connection to a higher power without the need of an external religion. I believe there's going to be a general movement, not just of Muslims, Arabs, not just because of Al-Aqsa and what may or may not happen with that, but a general trend towards a direct connection with the divine through self, as opposed through an external source. And that's not to say that religion is bad. Everyone should do what they believe brings them peace, what brings them help in difficult times. But I do see a general trend to coming back to self and grounding in self, connecting to the divine through self, getting answers through self, relying on self and not outsourcing so much of your beliefs, your values, your structure through an external body, whatever that may be. Let's talk about BRICS very quickly. BRICS and in general the global south. I know that it's not a homogeneous unit, but I'm going to try to talk in general themes around it. I might have to do a second video. BRICS are rising. The global south is rising in general. There could be skirmishes coming up with India and Pakistan. It's not going to be a major war, but there's a possibility of skirmishes. And it's like the America is going to try to, and the US, America and Europe are going to try to manipulate that war, but it's going to die down. So there's possibility of some further skirmish between India and Pakistan, but it will come down. China, Russia, Iran are going to continue their alliance together. It's going to get stronger. I believe Saudi Arabia is going to join that alliance. Saudi Arabia is trying to be friends with everyone, but they also noticed what happened with Qatar and the US, and they're going to realize that a lot of America's allies are going to realize that actually that doesn't mean much to be its ally. So they're going to look for alternatives, other alliances. On the front of it, they're going to show that everything is the same, but behind the scenes, they're going to make alliances with more countries in the global south, just because they're not certain that the US has their back. Mind you, a lot of the governments, especially in the Middle East, besides from it's not real, are compromised. And when I say compromised, I mean that they're not for their own people. I mean, this is a general theme throughout the world. The common man and woman are going to realize that their governments don't represent them. And this is what is going to give a much deeper movement towards sovereignty, finding self, like-minded people, relying on community, coming together through collaboration and not competition, because they know that they can't rely on the government and the institutions who they have relied on maybe for the last 100 years. We as humanity are being asked to become more sovereign. And in terms of disclosure, aliens, UFOs, extraterrestrial beings, free energy, there's going to be a lot that's going to come out into the mainstream, because it's already there, that there has already been free energy that has been clamped down by big families that own the world. There's free energy. There's also a cure for cancer that already exists. It's been existing and getting for at least 30 years. A lot of people know about this and they have been taken out. I just heard about another scientist, professor, who has been unalived. And it's going to be inevitable that the general population who looks a little bit underneath the surface, who doesn't rely on mainstream media, we are going to know that there have always been other beings other than us in the universe. Of course, there are. All the people who have been speaking about, not all, but a lot, who have been speaking throughout history of there being other beings, you can call them aliens, on this planet that have visited us. That's obvious. We're not alone in the universe. That's just going to be more mainstream. I also believe, like in this disclosure, governments are going to use artificial, or let's say human-made technology, and make it seem that it's alien. False flag. Look up Project Bluebeam. I believe there's a likelihood of or more chatter around extraterrestrial beings next year. It's already begun, and that is set to continue. There's so much technology that we don't know about that we've had for at least 50 years, since the Second World War, that's going to come out. We have alternative sources of energy that would make it possible to power up the whole world without people having to pay. That's the impetus for this. Free energy has already begun, and it's going to accelerate. However, the institutions and the vested interests and the lobby groups, of which there are many, that's what most of our current society is built on, they are going to cling to power, and they're going to try to prevent that happening. We already see that with the mass unaliving of whistleblowers, of scientists, obviously starting with Nikola Tesla. But the momentum has already begun. So as we've said, in terms of health now, the trends towards health, there's a lot more emphasis on holistic health, alternative health, frequency medicine, sound medicine, much less invasive and toxic treatments for what we believe currently are terminal diseases. And we are going to know, the mass are not going to know, but those who care to look beneath the surface are going to know that there are a lot of alternatives available. I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying it's available. There are many cures for illnesses that we deem to be terminal, where there are already cures for that are not going to inject harmful and toxic chemicals into our body. That it's not going to be anymore, or there are solutions available where the medicine is not worse than the disease, which is what a lot of currently we're going through. I believe that there is a high likelihood that they're going to try to release another form of bio warfare like they did during 2020 and the COVID scam and hoax. You can believe what you want, but there is a likelihood that they're going to try to unleash something like that in 2026. Maybe towards summer, could be before, but people are not going to fall for it. And those who do, well, we have free will. But the likelihood of something like that happening next year is high. Finally, is there another message that I see for next year? China, is there going to be a war in China next year? No, I don't believe that. I don't see for 2026 that there's a war with China. Russia is going to, as I said, win this Ukraine war. They have no desire to go to the West. They have enough land. They have enough resources. A lot of what is portrayed in Western media is far from what's the truth in terms of Russian expansion westwards. There's no desire to do that. And I believe Russia will continue to seek and deepen its alliances with the global South. I think we're going to stop here for now. I'm going to do another reading, part 2, with cards. And if you guys have any particular questions that you'd like me to look at before the end of this year, put them in the comments or send me an email or type it into the comments box. I will upload this and add chapters. And yeah, let me know what you think. It's been a challenging year for a lot of us. And the message for next year is to have trust, to have faith, to not get caught up in the chaos, of which there will be a lot, I'm not gonna lie. We're asked to come back to our sovereign selves, of our inner knowing, of befriending our neighbors, of being careful where we put our energy, where we deplete our energy, and to focus really on cleaning up your own house, as opposed to worrying about how you are going to fix the world. That does not mean we don't help people who are in dire straits. We always help where we can, but it's going to be very important to take care of self, home, and hearth. With that, I thank you for staying with me, if you're still here. And I look forward to your comments for the second part.